gospel reading is from Ecclesiastes 5, line 10. Whoever loves money never has money enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with his income. This too is meaningless.
The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Catherine is out of town this weekend. She is adding a certification to her resume, which I hope we will feel the benefits of here at Pender in time to come. I need to give you just a little bit of an explanation. I know probably not everybody in the room was raised in the United Methodist Church. I am a deacon, and there's two orders of ordination in the United Methodist Church: elder, which is what Pastor Catherine is, and deacon. If you'll notice, there's no communion on the table. Deacons are not consecrated to do sacrament. We're only consecrated to do service. So without an elder, we don't celebrate communion. But I wanted you to understand that. It's not because I didn't want to do communion with you. It's because the church tells me that's the job of the elder. If it's not too much trouble, would you stand for the reading of the gospel? I'm sure God appreciates that. Luke 12:15. Then he said to them, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Please be seated. You know, we've heard from the great philosopher Ecclesiastes. We've heard from the physician Luke. Now we need to hear the words of a 1990s philosopher. Because the boy with the cold hard cash is always Mr. Right. Because we are living in a material world, and I am a material girl. You know that we are living in a material world, and I am a material girl. Now we know this philosopher is Madonna. I made what I thought was an informed decision not to put a picture of her up for all of the men in the room, because I wanted to hold your attention for just a few minutes. Also not in Scripture, but a famous quote of Mr. Wesley: "When a person becomes a Christian, they become industrious, trustworthy, and prosperous." Now, if that person, when they get all they can and save all they can, does not give all they can, I have more hope for Judas Iscariot than for that person. Those are strong words. Now, without a doubt, some of you thought and probably said, well, Lloyd is going to be talking about Wesley and money. I know that you know that to be true. Annie said to me, don't go all John Wesley on him. So I promised I would go Madonna on you instead, and maybe just a taste of Wesley. But what is it about money that makes us all nervous? I believe that in the society in which we live today, we must address materialism to talk about gifts. What exactly does materialism mean in our world? We now live in a society that dwells on success as a measuring stick of a person. And often we are tied to the title or titles we may possess. The idea that we are only valued by the title or material possessions that we have or control seems to be the real maker of a person today. I will be the first to admit that our stuff is important. After all, can we exist without it? I have an intellectual understanding of the difference between needs and wants, but sometimes I don't use that in making great choices. It is indeed a choice in some or many cases. So let's go back to Madonna and unwind the meaning in her lyrics. In common use, the word materialist refers to a person for whom collecting material goods is an important priority, or the primary pursues wealth and luxury, or otherwise displays conspicuous consumption. This can be more accurately termed economic materialism. In the Christian community, it is more likely used to discuss distraction from discipleship of a person or their stewardship of their life. In days gone by, I was told that you are what you eat. So by comparison, does that mean we are what we collect? Maybe. But there are always exceptions to the rules. I go back to a saying of Jesus in the image of a camel trying to pass through the eye of a needle in describing the difficulty facing a wealthy person's need to hold on to riches and yet surrendering to the call of the gospel. Is it possible to have all the good stuff of this world and follow Christ? In Madonna's lyrics, I believe it is obvious that she addresses the need to connect with a person who possesses a lot of stuff. We have been afforded ample opportunity to view her life over the past 20 years or so to form our view of her. Then the question becomes, how much of ourselves look like what the lyrics in her song portray? I did not come here today to give you all the answers. I surely don't have all the answers, but we can all ask ourselves the hard questions. I think the hardest of questions that can be asked of this is, do I put my possessions ahead of my love and service to God? Be careful with the answer to that question, and let me be honest with you and say it is a difficult question because it holds a lot of traps and self-created loopholes. It is from this question that we tend to create the most defensive answers with the end goal of being justified within our own minds that we are right. Many of us have recently read the entire Old Testament in our efforts to read the Bible in a year. How many of you have done that? Ooh. Don't make me have to go to the pastor. All of the Old Testament. Once you get through it, you're really ready for the New Testament. All right, we're going to give you some grace. You can start again in January, but get it done. Story after story of Israel's turning away from God and then coming back should cause us to examine our own relationship with God. It was particularly profound that the Israelites were always full of explanations or justifications for their actions. How often was it the case of selfish wants and needs that drove their actions toward God? Do we have any behavior that resembles them? Self-justification can be a strong tool for us to use along the way. It can be a powerful weapon against doubt, and it can motivate us in our time of need for an explanation. It can also lead us into great trouble and create life situations that can seem unsolvable. Remember from a recent sermon, the Israelites went to Babylonia for 70 years because of some serious self-justification issues that did not please God. Now, if in my rambling you are lost, let me bring us to the focus of what we need to consider. Year after year, we know that we're going to be asked to support our church's mission through our giving. We all spend energy and time dealing with the question of how much should I give? We have heard all the biblical references and heard stories of others discovering the path to giving. When you deal with your reality of your finances, where are your main priorities? It has been a journey for Ann and me to gain an understanding that we can only be faithful if we practice what we preach. When you know where you are in the mission guiding your faith, you will begin to truly understand why giving is important. The understanding that it is essential to the church's budget is so secondary to gaining the understanding that it is essential to your stewardship and relationship with God. If your understanding is that you are giving to support a charity, how does that relate your understanding of how God supports you? Are you just one of God's charities? I tell the story often about being raised up on a farm in southern Mississippi and learning from the people who surrounded me about giving and community. I do that because, I talk to a lot of people about giving to Africa University. So normally, every time I'm in front of a congregation, I'm asking them to give to Africa University. That's not what this is about today. One of my favorite people was Richard, an African American who worked on the farm. We, in addition to cotton and corn, raised a huge multi-acre garden that supported the food supply for 3 families. Picking peas was a huge task once they were ready to be gathered. Richard had 4 baskets on the truck, and equal amounts went into his basket and the other basket. I asked him who would be receiving the other basket, and then I got my first real understanding of giving. He said to me, "Bud," that was my nickname growing up, and there's a story behind that. "The Lord richly blesses us with everything we need for life. This basket is for him." I learned later that basket was duplicated in everything we grew to eat. It went to Richard's pastor because it was worth more than money in those days. Giving is about relationship, reaching the understanding that God gives us everything we have, including life. When I served with UMCOR during the 90s, I witnessed many miracles because of giving beyond expectation of return. I worked the Great War and genocide in the Hutu-Tutsi War in East Central Rwanda. We walked into a huge camp on Sunday morning where only children and youth were housed. There were 4 of us from UMCOR. We split up to cover the facility. I was accompanied by a young man named Boyer Freeman who worked for Bread for the World, a close partner of UMCOR. And I might say he was also an outstanding running back for the University of Georgia in his day. We took the infant side of the camp that was ages 10 through 12 years of age. I have never been so moved in my entire life as I discovered the health needs of these children. I even witnessed the hospice ward for infants that had reached the level that nothing else could be done for them, and an angel nurse from Canada stayed with them right to the end. I also became aware that none of the children had shoes, a pressing need since any minor cut could bring a life-threatening infection, since children's health was so compromised by the situation. Because of gifts to UMCOR from the United Methodists, we ordered and delivered 10,000 pairs of shoes, not only covering this camp, but at least 2 others. Giving has consequences, and miracles can happen because of this selfless act. Realizing that giving is a selfless act is a great step in the right direction of becoming a true steward. We give not because the church's budget won't be met if we don't, but rather our role in the mission of that church won't be met And that really becomes a God thing for us. The decision to make this year's pledge strictly between us and God is a bold step. This year you're going to be asked to fill out a pledge card. That pledge card is going to be put into an envelope and sealed. On that consecration Sunday, you will bring that sealed envelope to the altar. Those envelopes will not be opened by the church. Next summer, those envelopes will be mailed back to you, and you will look and see how you were doing with the pledge that you made to God in your stewardship. Asking each of us to radically consider our commitment to the mission and understanding the obligation that we're making to God and not to a budget, to a mission, not to a bank statement, but to a path to real discipleship and not merely church membership. This is indeed a bold step. Remember what Jesus said in Matthew 10:42. And if anyone gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones, who is my disciple, truly I tell you, that person will certainly not lose their reward. As it is written in the old gospel song, if just a cup of water I place within your hands, then just a cup of water is all that I demand. So if by death to living they can thy glory see, I'll lift my cross and follow close to thee. I urge you to consider what you will commit and then do it. No one will be sending you reminders about your pledge. No one will be checking up to see if the pledge is meeting the expectation. Only you and God. And really, isn't that the way it was meant to be? Amen.
Amen.